Hey, welcome to Unlocking the Cage Higher podcast. The topic, the past, present, and future of a man. That man that we're going to be talking to today is going to be Jonathan Corbett, also known as JB, presented to you by Suicide Awareness Ministry. We also have another podcast called Letting Go. But today the focus is Unlocking the Cage Higher podcast. We learned a little bit on episode 1 about who Jonathan is, some of his viewpoints, some of the things that have shaped who he has become, good and bad. And then we also went and tapped into a little bit of how did those experiences shaped American history. Before we ended that podcast, we talked about we talked a little bit about pulling all these things together, all of these thoughts and laying them all out. We may share different viewpoints, different thoughts, but how can we come to the table and really have meaningful conversations? So he definitely challenges all who listen to these conversations and to be a part. All right, Jonathan, how's the day going?
It's going wonderful.
All right. This is, I said I wanted to start this off just a little bit different this time. This is the month of February. This is Black History Month. I know we've been talking a lot about society, past, and things have shaped who you become, but is there anything in particular, and we can save this for the end of this podcast as well, that you want to say as it relates to Black History Month? Because there's a lot of Black Americans that have paved the way for us to be where we're at, and then there's some other people who are currently paving the way for the future. So is there anything you want to say just to highlight?
There's something in I don't know, for some people it may get like a little like dark, but I feel like it's needed, right? Like I feel like it's needed about talking about the concept of slavery, and I don't think a lot of people realize how much history plays a part into the consciousness and mentality that we hold today in our culture. Still, they feel like it don't affect us because it's over with in mind, right? But I wanted to speak into some of the conditions and circumstances and atmospheres that set up the hearts and the minds of people today. So I'll get right into it. I end up, after the last time we talked, I ended up having a conversation with this Native American man. And during this conversation, he told me about one of the religious things they do, which is called sweat lodge. And in sweat lodge, what they do, they go in a tent and, like a fire smoldering and, like they're in there sweating, and I guess they're playing a drum also, right? And he was like, do you know the concept of this? And I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, well, the concept of it is it's supposed to be like a mother's womb, like her stomach. Like it's hot and dark, like the mother's stomach. And he's like, and the drum is the beat. It's like the beat of her heart. And I was like, man, that's a wonderful concept. Because he's like, a mother's heartbeat is the first thing you hear. And it is. While you're inside her womb, like the conditions of a heart is the first thing you hear, the atmosphere of a heart, right? So I got to thinking to myself, what does a Black woman's heartbeat sound like? Because I'm pretty sure it's quite a bit different than others. And I don't know how God works in other people's life, but how he works in my life is he naturally answers those questions. Because I was thinking of an extreme circumstance, and a man that I talked to in here, he approached me. And somehow we got on the matter of how his mother died. And his mother was raped and killed in front of his eyes. And I was like, well, and then he was like, he couldn't even go next door. His family's house was next door. But then when he went next door, finally, his auntie asked him, like, hey, what was that noise? He was like, that was my mom. She got shot. He's like, what? He was like, yeah, she should have shut up. And I was thinking, like, what would make a little kid say that? Because at this time, his mind and heart had to already be some type of hardened or conditioned and set up to where this became a part of his normal. And this is what I mean by the atmospheres and circumstances they were born into. So I picture like a storm. Like some people are born into calm places. Some people are born into storms, thunderstorms. Some people hurricanes and tornadoes. I feel like this man's life was a tornado. So to go farther along so people won't like judge this man, he was actually 4 years old when that happened. And I told him later on, like, hey, I want to talk about this, like, during this session, you know, like, so tell me more because I don't want to mischaracterize this situation that made you say that. And as he broke it down to me, he was like, his mom was a strong woman, you know, like she was one of the first women to work in a sawmill in that state, Chicago, Gary, Indiana. And, you know, like their dad was tough. He was super tough, you know, like what people don't realize, like most times your parents were born at the end of slavery. So a mentality was conditioned by their parents from slavery, you know, like, and they got this stern, hard conditioning of their heart, the same, like, I'm pretty sure people seen that movie. I forget the name of the movie. Everybody know the movie. But anyway, the movie where the slave, she had the stuff for the slave hands to make it hard for the little boy to pick the cotton.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing goes now in a mental way. That same thing they put on their hands to harden it. People put that on their hearts now, in their mind and their mentalities to harden it because they trying to condition their people for this life. And he conditioned his daughter the same way he was raised. He was stern as him. One day he said his granddad took him out to get his hair cut and brought him back home. And then his mom looked at him and seen his haircut, and she punched her dad like, hey, don't you touch my son. Don't you ever touch my son. You want a son, you go have your own son.
Right.
But this was the same way he raised her. And he was like, she met a man the same sternness as my dad. And he used to beat on her until somebody asked her, like, man, why do you do this? Why do you keep putting yourself through this? And she ended up getting another man. When she got another man, that man was over there one day. He's like, we was getting the groceries out the car. And then he just walked straight in the house. He seen the man. He looked. He walked straight in the house. And he looked at the man who was there getting the groceries with it. He's like, you finna go help my mom? Because he knew it was finna happen. They fight and argued all the time when they was together. And now it's another man here. He knows it's finna be a problem. So the man just looked at him. So he went into the house. And when he went into the house and opened the door, he seen the man between his mom's legs raping her with a gun out. He pulled the gun on him like, what? And he like, man, nothing. He's like, I just came in here to get my pajamas. You know, like, what a little 4-year-old boy supposed to do at this time? You know, like, was he supposed to fight him? Was he supposed to die? So he kind of just walked away. When he walked outside, the man had went across the street to the house that he could never go to because of his mom. Said he couldn't go over there, and went to gather grandma and the sister. But when she came out, the mom came running down the stairs, and she was like, go get my granddad. He finna kill me. Right as she said that, and she was stepping off the porch, the man shot her in the back. He was like, he seen his mom's chest, you know, like come out the front. She fell. Her mom and his auntie came over her. They standing over her. The man walked up to him and looked at him as if he would kill them both, and then he just ended up walking away. And then later on, he went in the house and told his auntie what had happened, right? But I tell you this story because if you look at the conditions that shaped this man from 4 years old into who he became today, and this is a man of God now. He's respectful. He says hi to everybody he sees in the morning, shakes their hand. He's one of the most respectful people I know. But the level of violence is hiding underneath the surface of that because at that one time he was victimized and he never wanted to be a victim again. And his family taught him to never be a victim again. How do you blame someone for this stress, but yet you would say somebody who came from a war in another country who most of the time, let's be honest, our country overpowers in war. They're traumatized by seeing people die next to them, which they should be. It's not a normal thing. But how much not normal is it to watch this happen to your own family members? And these are some of the conditions and atmospheres that set up in our culture. And I'm never here to explain away the bad things that happen. Bad things do happen, but I am here to explain the side of life that you don't know or you're not aware of. And that's why we're doing this podcast. But anyway, that's all I want to say.
I would say there's so much to unwrap in that one particular story, because I started off asking you questions as it relates to Black History Month, and then you led me into a path where we started talking about a heartbeat, and then how you had this conversation with this Native American man. I guess from that, I'll say one or two things and make a comment here. One of my question that I want you to think about is, what does a woman's heartbeat look like to you? The next thing I'll say is, I don't know if people really understand the magnitude of how one pivotal point or a particular incident in a person's life can alter the trajectory of their life moving forward. I
You
also
have 1 minute
I
remaining.
I also don't want to give too much power to the things that has taken place in our life, because by the time we get done with this, I want you to understand that your past does not define your future. But I do want to acknowledge that there's some people who are still suffering with those things and those pivotal points in their life that has taken place. And so when we come, we'll get into it. The question I want you to start thinking about, Jonathan, is, what does a woman's heartbeat look like? Because it's different. It's different.
Yeah, it is for everybody.
But but the nourishing aspect is always there. I don't care what kind of mom you have, whether you think she's bad or good. That place, that mother's love, it can never be replaced. So what does that look like?
I think it looks different for everybody, and that's why part of me brought that story up. I think it's just that. It's those conditions that set her up for growth. Like, you got to remember, what you put in people will come out of them. So if other people may have heard something harsh when I heard a little boy say she should have shut up, but if you ever listen to what people tell kids most of the time, it's those very words. Like, shut up and listen. So in that time, maybe that was the best advice he had for her. Like, if she would have shut up, if he wouldn't have said nothing, maybe everything would have been all right. Maybe I would still have my mom. And I think it looks different for everybody, because some people grow up in completely nurturing homes, and even in those times where you have harsh mothers, like where you have more stern mothers, I won't even say harsh, you have more stern mothers, they still have a nurturing care that's out of this world. The love and affection they have for their own is real powerful, because even after that, he was like, man, she cared about me so much, and she kept everybody away from me and off of me, and their influence off of me, that when she was finally gone, I didn't get no hugs or sorries that your mom gone. It was more so like, shut up now, she gone. Ain't nobody here to save you. And this is why I talk about the atmosphere, an atmosphere that creates a person. But the unrecognized trauma in it, but trauma doesn't have to overpower you in this life. You can take a hold of it, but you have to consciously work for that every day, because whatever your learned behavior is becomes your learned behavior.
Yeah, and it's so and it's so true that like I
but
said.
Hold on, I got off point. To me, a mother's heartbeat is just that. It's whatever conditions made her, she gives those same things, but she gives them in more abundance than she had them, because she knows what she was missing.
And it's so crazy that I'm listening to you, and I'm reflecting on that question myself, and I feel like when I hear from my perspective, a woman's perspective here, is that a woman's heartbeat is love. It's peace. That mother is protective. It wants to protect you from things, and as you stated before, there's some things that the past generation went through that we didn't go through, and quite frankly, some of us still don't comprehend. I don't know if we will be able to succeed or make it in a generation such as the ones that they've come from. And that's why I think it's imperative for us to not judge other people's generation and where they come from, and not judge their situation and not judge. There has to be like some grace and mercy for where people are at in their life. Like, not to make an excuse, not to be an enabler, not to say that, yes, we all have the ability to change, but I think meeting people where they're at and understand that we come from different places and we've also seen different things will help you to see people the way God see people, where you see the heart instead of the situation, and then you learn how to approach people. You learn how to entreat people. You learn how to pray for people, because the things that you've seen, the things that I've seen, they're very different, and they traumatized us differently, and we responded differently. Anyways, this is not about me. I like where the conversation is going. I want to jump right into this. Again, part two, part of what we started the conversation in the first podcast. And we talked about, you told us a little bit about yourself. You told us about, we've reflected a little bit on the past and how it shaped our identity. And now I want to talk about it from a societal point of view and talk about some of those past foundations as well. From your perspective, where did society originate? Upon what did it originate on, and what were its foundational expectation of men? Because we're talking about men here. So where did it come from your perspective? And what were its foundational expectations? What did they expect from men?
Every society, every civilization around the world was given some type of rules or guidelines from beings that came from the sky. But I believe in myself, like from what I came to know and believe is true from all my studying, that some of those gods were there to show you what a god wasn't, and there was one God who was there to show you who was a true God, because some of the things those gods asked for, you can tell that a higher being wouldn't ask for. So you had to learn to differentiate. So society began with religious deities that gave men understanding that their existence was beyond what animals inherited from the Creator. The foundation was a structure that allowed civilization to study and discern the godly mind versus the demonic. The expectations were to disengage from these lower thoughts and beings and strive towards unifying humans in love and peace. In my thoughts, because who wants to spend eternity with a negative being? If forever is forever, it must be decided where you are to go after this phase of existence is over.
Yeah. So you feel like that so the expectations, if you could sum it up in 3 words, what were the expectations in 3 words of men?
3 words: peace,
Mm-hmm.
understanding, and compassion.
Peace, understanding, and compassion. Now, are we talking about what the world or society expected from men, or are we talking about what the man expected for themselves? Like, I just want peace, I want compassion, I want understanding, whatever the case may be. What did society expect from men?
Oh, I think society expected all those things, but I think society expected to join people together with different ideas and views.
When I look at stuff like this,
because at some point we all had to work together.
Mm-hmm. When I look at some of these things, and I look at some of the traumatic events that people have been through, it has me to question, were there alternative motives in the way that people thought? We're trying to bring a society together, but how are we bringing the society together? What is the hidden agenda? How are we influencing the generation to move in a direction where we need them to go? Just like TV now, they put everything in front of you on social media and TV to influence, and that's an agenda to get you to move in a certain direction. And so when I asked that question, what was the expectation of men? Do you think it had anything to do with, and I don't want to be leading, but do you think it had anything to do with the agenda at that particular time? Because I want you to be strong. I want you to have a mindset. I want you to listen. I do want you to have some understanding. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. But then there's a place where men challenged what people thought and things didn't go as planned. right? When I challenge your viewpoints, when I challenge what you're asking of me, when it doesn't make sense and when it's not fair, when it's not fair for you, but when it's fair for you, but it's not fair for me, where's the equality in that? And so when I ask, what was the expectation of men, I think I'm saying, do you think there was an alternative agenda that society pushed men in a certain direction, and then the outcome became what it is now? We're in a generation where we have a lot of people who are lost. We're in a generation where people are still fighting for the same things people were fighting for before, if that makes sense.
No, that's powerful, and I've thought of that many times. That I ain't gonna lie, like all the different things I seen that lead me to my own perspective of that tells me yes, there was people along the way with hidden agendas who implanted them in the middle of the ideas that were meant for peace and community.
So then when I think about those things, right, and we haven't really touched on it, but do you believe, so the question becomes, do you believe men were ever truly free? And why or why not? So yes or no?
No, I don't.
And then if you don't, why?
I believe you have the free will to choose right from wrong, but there's always a price or reward for each choice. What makes man truly free is his ability to be forgiven and welcome onto the good path whenever he chooses. Yeah, like I don't think any action you take in this life is free, but yet you can do it. So that is what they call free will.
So most people might take this a couple of different ways. The way that you taking it with free will, but I'm asking the space that we live in, the embodiment, the way we interact in society. No matter if you're in prison or outside in this real world here, do you believe men has ever been truly free? Some people feel as if they live in prison in the place where they're currently at, like they can't get from one place to the next. Some people feel like the system is so broken that we've never been free. Some people feel like as if this world has always been controlled by something, and that we're just here to pay, to work, and not really truly live. So then I come back to the same question to you. Do you believe we were ever free? Or do you believe people are imprisoned in the reality that they've created, or the reality that society has created? Or what is your perspective?
My perspective is yes and no. I say yes because yes, the way that society is set up today and now, like it's like a program. It's like a program. You're supposed to do a certain thing, and if you don't do a certain thing, the program will basically delete you. Like you won't be able to finance yourself. You won't be able to eat. You won't be able to take care of your kids. You won't if you don't fit in with their program, which is why some people live off the grid and all of that stuff. Like because they feel like their freedom is found there. Where some people feel like this is a great freedom because you have many things that you can go and get with the system and program that they set up. But it was a sociologist called Max Weber who came up with the idea that no, you're not free, and he called it the iron cage. Like you're locked inside this iron cage of society and expected to do this thing, or society will replace you. And I come to find there is some truth in that. There's a great amount of truth in that.
So we talk about these things, right? And we're finding truth in whether people are free, whether they believe they're free, whether they've been imprisoned themselves, and or truly things around them, or elements and circumstances have imprisoned them, right? When we come to that place. One of the last questions I want to ask you, and I want to kind of just ponder on for a little bit, is in what ways might men have contributed to their own lack of freedom? And this is for me, this is a good question because there's some things in my own personal life that I've contributed to that has made me feel as if I'm not free. I mean, And it was things around me and situations around me that let me know or allowed me to see that I was in prison in myself through my situations that I fell victim to, or my situations that I failed to acknowledge or whatnot. So, in what ways might men have contributed to their own lack of freedom from your perspective?
I believe they contributed by not participating in the things that they structured around their freedom. It was always a problem with us having political power. It was all, and you can see what's going on now politically, to where everything is changing and being shifted at the drop of a dime, because no one that you care about and no one that you know is there to stop it.
So when we start talking about that, contributed to people lack of freedom, why don't you think people speak? Why don't you think people get out
You
there?
have 1
and
minute remaining.
Yeah, why don't you think people speak?
A lot
Or
of people
stand
feel
up.
inadequate.
So,
A lot of people don't believe in themselves.
and where does that come from? Because you're right. If I don't believe in myself, I'm not gonna say something. I could be in a room full of people, and if these folks in this room can articulate themselves just a little bit better, it may put a little fear in me. But we shouldn't have that, because obviously God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. So, where does that come from? That feeling that we have when we choose not to stand up.
I don't know. I look at it in two ways. There's a fear of success and there's a fear of failure, right? But that's like this. Like I could be fearful about this, and then sometimes I am about speaking. I don't. Who wants the world to judge or criticize their thoughts, right? But this is me, unapologetically me. Who cares what you think about me? This is me.
You were just telling me how some of those things may have affected or impacted the way people refuse to stand up. We were talking about the lack of confidence, and I asked you where that came from. And then we jumped into like you not being apologetic for things. I'm assuming things that have gotten you to where you're at, shaped you in the way you present yourself. But not everybody gets to that place where they're unapologetic for certain things. How did you get there?
I had to learn myself. I had to learn what I liked, what I disliked, and I had to go into an in-depth study of myself. But I'm a natural introvert anyway, so I'm introspective. So I have many conversations with myself. But then one day I got to the point of like that, like, how is a conversation with myself ever helping the world if I have all these ideas about change and these ways of progress stuck in my mind and things that can help my culture and my community, and the only conversations I'm having it with is myself?
But if people are so afraid to speak up, or we've been told that we're less than, we've been told that we don't articulate our words as well, we've been told that our opinion really doesn't matter. When we've tried to fit in, we find ourselves out. Like, you may be strong and have gotten to that place, but how do you encourage? Ultimately, what I want to know is, how do you encourage the next person? Because what we're saying is not as easy. And like, you taught yourself to be. What I'm hearing is you taught yourself to be strong. You taught yourself to be unapologetic. You taught yourself, and I'm assuming some of these things that you taught yourself has come through failure, have come through people miscriticizing you, people misjudging you, people looking down on you, people. It came from somewhere, because you don't just wake up one day and say, I have to be strong. So two parts to this. I feel like
I think,
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, I think you're completely right on every level. I think like part of my strength was instilled in me by my family. And, like, what part of it did come at the harshest criticism. My picture's been on the news for one of the worst things you can do. I went to trial and lost. Well, you're guilty. You're here, like all of this, like all of these things. I came here and I had they do something called a TABE test. And that's to judge your education level. I had college level reading, but I had a third grade math score.
Yeah.
But I had to pick it up from where I was. I was really at a third grade math score. So how do I get better? I go from third grade up. Like I can't get no lower than this. Like, and that's what people got to realize. Like, one of my things in life I say is you can't fail until you die accomplishing nothing. And no matter what age you is, most of the time that's quite a bit off. The average death of men is 75. The average death of women is like 85. Like, so if you got all this time still to make something of yourself and do something with yourself, you ain't failed yet. So why don't you put forth the effort today and every single day to make yourself better, so one day you can rise above every expectation or limitation anybody ever put on you.
Yeah. I like something you said, and one thing I'm going to take from this conversation, because I think it's important, it's imperative to reiterate. Wherever you find yourself, wherever you're at, you can't get no lower than what you already feel in those situations. That's what you just said, and I just kind of want to reiterate that a little bit, because sometimes we feel like life has beat us up. We feel like we've been challenged in ways that there's no coming back, but you are here. Like, no matter where you're at, you're here. You're right here in the moment. You're present in the day. And no matter how you feel, we want to encourage you that you can come back, and you can, but for you to come back and for you to get to the place where you want to get or you desire to get, it's going to take some willpower on the person's behalf. I think, and Jonathan, you can tell me your side as well, your perspective as well. I think you have to be willing to say, this is it. I'm at my lowest. The only place I can go from the bottom is up. But in order for me to go up, I have to get up. I can't soak in the what ifs. I can't soak in where I've come from. I can't soak in that place, because none of those things are helping me. None of those things are, none of those things are aiding me to the place where I eventually want to be.
Hey, my whole life, right? They've like, and this goes into one of my philosophies. I have many of them, if you can't tell by now. But my philosophy is there is no such thing as negative criticism. Like, it's only constructive criticism, because if you tell me the worst thing about myself, the only thing I could do is better myself.
That's it.
People told me all my life, you got a big head. Well, I got my body bigger to match my head. What else can you do? What else can you do? But if somebody tell you the negative thing about you, the most negative thing about you, they say the harshest things about you, why can't you take that and now work on that and make it better? Thank you.
Yeah.
You just gave me an observation about myself that I may not have. Instead of letting it ruin my day, I'm finna make it make my day.
Yeah, I think there's some. So let me just say two parts to that. First of all, I think men and women may share different opinions when it comes to that perspective. To that, I don't know why people talk about people and their body. I have no idea. I have no idea why people do this, and we're gonna get off for a second here, but I have no idea why people do it. There's so many people that are insecure. Do you think when I was growing up and I was in high school, I know my lips didn't fit my body? My lips was way bigger than my body. And people will point it out, big lips and blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking in my head, like, I'm a kid. Do you know what you're doing to me? And so when I go places, I try to poke my lip in. They so big, I can't poke them in. It's just, and do you know what you're doing to me? So now when I'm at these meetings, I'm in my adulthood, I have carried that with me, that all you saw was my lips. And now I'm older. And I filled into my lips. My body filled into my lips, because obviously you get older, you mature, you grow. Leave people alone, people. That's what I want to say. That was my little rant today. I don't know why people do it, because it is very hurtful, very condescending, and you just don't know what somebody's dealing with. Somebody actually just said this to me the other day. They said, when I was younger, you said something to me, and you don't know how that impacted me. I've been on the treadmill ever since. And I was like, oop. So it causes me to just reflect and look at myself as well. But anywho, Jonathan, thanks for getting me off on that tangent.
Yeah, welcome.
This podcast again was really just to talk about, this is episode 2 here, you guys. We were just talking about understanding society, past foundation, some of the things that have some of the expectations of men, and then talking about the freedom, like the freedom that we have or we don't have, and then kind of why, if you're listening, if you think that we're free, if you think that we're not, why and why not? Because I may share the same sentiments if when the conversation is brought out and never really thought about it from your perspective. And to understand this, you guys, that everybody's perspective can help somebody. We're looking at things through different lenses, but what we see is different, but it all can be brought together to the table to help one another. It helps me to understand you. It helps me to understand where you come from. It helps you to understand me. And then, what we're really doing, guys, is we're meeting each other where we're at. I'm not the type of person that's going to just sit down and read a book, but there's some people who are. And then when they're able to bring that back to me, guess what? I'm able to learn from that and say, wow, I might get sleepy reading that book, but what you just brought to me, I'm learning. We're taking from each other, and I want to say this is one of the ways that you can add value to one another too, by listening, sharing, going back and forth, having those healthy dialogues where we may not always agree. You may not always agree with what Jonathan is saying, but you can have a healthy dialogue. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. And just remember, you may see a 6, somebody else may see a 9. Does that mean that you're right and they're wrong and vice versa? It does not. It just means we're seeing things differently. So anyways, that's all. Go ahead, Jonathan. I'll let you. Jonathan, I'll let you have the final words on this here before we close out.
But we welcome it. We welcome questions and comments, all of that, because I could see it one way, but you may see it another. But the reason I told that story in the beginning was this, right? There may be many of things you're born into: storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, all of this, right? But now think if you was this man, right? And after that, he was raised up to be strong and never be vulnerable again. The next thunderstorm you were in, would you want to be the thunder striking the family tree? Or would you want to be the tree that's getting struck?
Yeah.
A lot of our communities is just like that. Nobody wants to be the one being struck.
Yeah.
So they strike first.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it what it is. But I just try to have you understand somebody else's perspective. Because once you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, that's when you're capable of growth. And growth comes with uncomfortability. It's uncomfortable sometimes putting ourselves in those situations. But
right.
We have to make ourselves uncomfortable to find a new place in life.
That's right. You got to be uncomfortable to get comfortable. And most people want to share in the glory, but don't want to share in the pain. Most people want to share in the outcome, but don't want to go through the process. There's so much that we can say about this, and we can speak all day. But this is going to wrap it up for episode 2 here, talking about past foundation and understanding society and the expectations of society. When we come back for episode 3 here, what we're going to be talking about, just so we put it on your radar, is lessons that we've learned from societies. The interpretation and influence, because society has influenced us, whether we want to admit it or not. And so some of the things we're going to be talking about is, those lessons that society has taught us over time. We're going to talk a little bit about societal norms and expectations that have influenced us. Boys don't cry, right? They're taught to be strong. Some of those things, we want to pull some of those things out. And then how far did that get you? Where did that get you when we just teach one way and not balance? We're going to be talking about how societal conditioning has shaped us to act and behave in a predetermined way. And then, lastly, what we're going to talk about is from whoever's perspective, and we're talking about Jonathan's perspective here, do you feel you act as an independent thinker, or are your actions influenced by societal programming? Want to talk about that because it's very big in the generation that we are in. So anyways, we want to just thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us. Again, this is called Unlocking the Caged Heart. The topic is the past, present, and future of a man, presented by Suicide Awareness. And our guest speaker, of course, is none other than Jonathan Corbett, JB. And so, Jonathan, any final words as we exit out of this podcast?
Love, peace, and chicken grease.
Don't forget the chicken grease, y'all.